for example, I'm on an admissions board for a medical school, and we very much get pulled into obviously grades and these standardized tests. And it's interesting though when we get talking, the reality is that those are not necessarily the best measures for who's going to make a great doc in the future. And I think, particularly when I ran a training program for neurosurgery, we realized that just because somebody could cite every journal article that was ever written, or, the Latin names of every disease and all that sort of thing, didn't necessarily make them great surgeons. And what we really looked for was what I called street smarts. I wanted somebody who, when presented with something that is out of the blue, something that's not expected, that they could figure their way out of it, because that's what a lot of brain surgery was like.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from central British Columbia, Prince George. And for those people that wonder about Prince George, Canada, British Columbia, it's an absolutely beautiful province, a large province. Prince George is about 500 miles north or 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. And it's a beautiful, beautiful day. It's a beautiful nature all around us. And we have a very special guest today, and his name is Dr. Gary Simonds. Gary, welcome to the show.
Well, hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored and look forward to this.
So now, do you mind if I call you Gary, not Dr. Gary?
Oh, please do. let's not use the doctor.
Yeah, to me it's important because you have an amazing background in history, and especially things that are so important today, and particularly in the world where we so much more conscious, and especially myself and some of the things that I do already in terms of the well-being and the health and all those other things related to that. So, what location are you at, Gary?
I currently live in a little town called Black Mountain in the western part of North Carolina, which is the mountainous part of North Carolina.
Yeah, a beautiful area as well, right? The Carolinas.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. In the Appalachian Mountains, we're close to a city called Asheville.
Okay, I'm familiar with that name. Now, your background has been, you are a neurosurgeon in the past, and you were educated, obviously, in the United States in medicine-related issues. Can you tell us a bit about your background and your studies that led to all of this?
Sure, lots of studies, I guess. But I went to Dartmouth undergrad, Dartmouth College undergrad, and majored in biochemistry and a fair amount of religion, because originally I wasn't sure what I was going to go into. I thought maybe I would go into the ministry, but ended up eventually going to medical school at Rutgers in New Jersey. And then I trained in neurosurgery, meaning you go through 7 years of what we call residency training after graduating from medical school. And I did my residency training at Walter Reed Army Medical Center because by that time I was in the Army, and then went on to practice in the Army, and then in a series of other places, eventually coming to run the neurosurgery program and training program at Virginia Tech in Virginia.
So that's quite some training, and quite some background. How long were you in the Army, Gary?
I guess, if you totaled it up, it would be somewhere around 15 years, but 11 years on active duty.
in active duty, meaning specializing in medicine and medical related issues, or as a
Yeah, I
surgeon?
was always on the medical side of things, so
Right.
I didn't have to run around and jump out of tanks or anything like that.
No, no. Yeah. So the other thing that I find interesting, just seeing your background, which is extremely interesting, we'll get into the details as well. But when you first decided as to what will I do with my life going forward in terms of a career, it was between going to religion or medicine and becoming a minister or being involved in that area. The two are related, but not directly in terms of from a career perspective.
Yeah, I guess so. When you think about it, I suppose both very much have a desire to help other people out and serve other people. Um, I think it creates an interesting dynamic between the spiritual world, if you will, and the scientific world, which often kind of are at loggerheads.
Yeah.
They often don't necessarily want to agree on things, but I never found them to be mutually exclusive anyway.
Right. And so the studies that that take you through the medical education, and especially with a specialty in brain surgery in particular, is just about as delicate as it can get, right? So I would say,
Yeah, I think I have to agree. It probably doesn't get much more intense or delicate as when you're operating on the brain. So takes a lot of time, takes a lot of practice, and you never fully master it. You are continuously improving, I think, throughout your career.
so you did that for a long time, and you now are you retired from that part of your life, at least as far as the physical part is concerned, if I'm correct, and then you want on to a different direction that still include teaching or being attached to training or educating people in the field that you were specializing in then, but you want much further than that. You became a writer, a speaker, and all those other things. So I would imagine, I'm just imagining that, as you already indicated, that if you're a brain surgeon, there is a lot of stress related to that type of a profession. And is there a period in life after you do it for a period of time that the stress side of that type of a profession becomes challenging?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question. I've spent a lot of time kind of studying it. So, just to address a couple of things, I did retire from actual surgery, but it was more related to my own illness. I had developed a neurological illness myself, ironically, and began having some trouble with my vision during surgery and stuff like that. And it kind of made it pretty clear I better not be trying to operate when things aren't functioning at its very best in terms of my own body. But I took a real interest in the world of burnout in medicine, 15 plus years ago, and have really been studying it and writing about it ever since. But yeah, there is plenty of stress to be had, and I guess one of the ways to illustrate it is that throughout my surgical career, I was very busy. I love to operate. I operated all the time, virtually every day of the week, um, and just was thrilled by it, was always looking for more. I probably put out twice as many operations as the average neurosurgeon. But since I retired, since I stopped operating, um, I noticed that I haven't missed it. I thought for sure I would miss it badly. I thought I'd be, every day wishing I was back in the operating room, and I don't miss it at all. Um, and and so I began thinking about that and looking back. I think it the point is that every single operation, no matter how simple it felt, had a level of stress because
Yeah.
you just wanted to do your very best, and you put a lot of load on your own shoulders. You just want to be as good as you can be, have the operations go as well as they can, have the patients do well, their families do well, all that sort of thing. And it doesn't always go that way. And I think having that weight off of one's shoulders after decades really is a relief.
Yeah, and it's something that you don't get used to, kind of thing, I would imagine. Is that, especially with all the stress around it, that, like saying, okay, my husband is going, has a brain operation, so the whole family is concerned, and then we don't know exactly what it is, so he's going to be operated on then and then, and all the anxiety around it, and then already from that perspective, it's serious, very serious, no matter what. And then, if you the neurosurgeon, that mistakes are not very forgiving. It's not, it has to be done right. The other thing that I found interesting is that, at least from my perspective, is that I'm 83. I just turned 83 November the 1st. And
Happy birthday.
well, thank you. And so I try to be fit as well as I can. There is always my wife is very health conscious. She's vegan, and I'm probably 80-20. And then I do the same as we all do, likely, is that especially New Year's Eve, you make that commitment. We're going to go to the gym, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And then a couple of weeks after New Year's, then we find the gym is really taking too much of our time. We can find 100 reasons why we shouldn't go, and then we'll wait till next year to do the same over again. Unless you get and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but that's what I'm saying in presentations that I do and things that I'm aware of. The body is very forgiving, but it does not take well to abuse, continuous abuse, and then the results of that can be very sudden and have major ramifications. And in my case, in 2008, I had a case of diverticulitis, and I barely could come up with the word and saying, diverticulitis, what is it? Well, as you well know, it's the colon, and but I always say if you have pain on the right, it's probably the appendix, and then on the left side is colon. And if you go to your doc, then the doc would say, okay, well, eat more greens and eat less of this, that, and so on. It should kind of go away. In my case, it was a breach. And so then before it becomes a real problem, I have about 48 hours, I think, something like that. But I have a very high threshold for pain, and I waited quite a while. Then we have a place in Victoria, British Columbia, so that's where I'm on the weekends. And then during the week, I'm in Prince George, so I fly back and forth. So when I got that pain, I had to make my way back, in my mind, back to Prince George. I still don't know how I did it. Then got to my doc, that was a personal friend, waited too long there. He said, get to the hospital, and then I got an operation. I came about that close, I think. So they took a section out of my colon, about 20 centimeters, and then put it back together. That was in 2008. The point that I'm trying to make is this one, is that got my attention big time. And so I said, finally, so I have to look at my diet and then go to the gym, get a trainer, and I did that. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years. Trained very hard with my trainer because I need a trainer that can kind of direct me. I work by appointments, and and I have other things to do. But if I have an appointment, I follow up on those appointments, and So then after about 6 or 7 years, and then I give it all that I got. That is typical me. That's what I do. And then somebody said in the gym, "Hey, have you ever thought about competing?" And I said, "Who, me?" And then I thought, yeah, it's a goal that I like, And so I started to work even harder. And then in 2017, I started competing locally, bodybuilding physique. Came in second bodybuilding, third in physique, then qualified provincial. Did the same there, third in bodybuilding, second in physique, qualified national, and then for the Arnolds. And then obviously what happened is COVID happened, and 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 then now I'm back again training at the gym, and I want to compete again in 24. And I've already talked to Arnold about, I said, I want to compete at the Arnolds. He said, okay, well, come down and we'll take pictures and all the other kind of things. So the other part is that is on the physical side. On the diet side, I'm much more conscientious of what I eat. And if I go to the grocery store and buy things, I do all the grocery shopping, actually, amazingly, even for my wife. I stay on the outside of the store where all the healthy foods are, not in the middle lanes. And, and so I believe that at 83, I'm reasonably healthy. Although a couple of things happened to me that you likely are familiar with, is that I've been in lumber mills since I was 14, actually, so that's about 68 years. So my hearing became a bit of a challenge. And then the other one was my sight became a problem. On the one ear, I got macular degeneration, and I'm getting injections in that. And that was an adjustment for me. And that is all in the last couple of years. Now with the hearing, I got, as I explained to you before we started, it's amazing technology now, because when I grew up, if people had hearing issues, they got this big thing sitting behind their ear, and they didn't want that. But now I have hearing aids, they are inside my ear, they connect through a piece here so that I can go through the computer to talk directly to you. But it's all things to do with health. And the other interesting part about it, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, because you're an author, I'm an author as well. I wrote 3 books, and I'll show them to you here in a little bit later as we get further into it. But the one book that I'm working on today that will come out next July is, the title of the book is Living Young, Dying Old. And to me, that is quality of life. And saying that it's not so much your age, but the quality of you as an individual, the quality of life that counts more than anything. And so far, I'm very fortunate. I have lots of energy still, and I have a number of companies that I'm running and I'm active in. I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late. I always make my bed, and I love the things that I'm doing. And I'm very active, as you are, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm writing books. I have been writing books. I'm writing two more. I'm an active public speaker, and in demand, and and then obviously I'm very active on podcasting. It's I found it amazing that I'm talking to you, in North Carolina, and I'm sitting in Prince George, and we're sitting here as friends across each other and having a conversation about a number of things. So that's kind of gives you a little bit of a background on me, is that trying to stay healthy, but I can relate to what you were saying in a way, maybe not as what I have, but that my eyesight is extremely important to me to do all the things that I do, the writing but I'm managing, I believe, working with docs that are very qualified, and what I have is very common, as I understand.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is, but obviously you're holding yourself together exceptionally well, and I think it is a testament to putting effort into it. When we're young, I don't think we have to put an ounce of effort into it, and everything's working great, and we feel good, and all that sort of thing. And as the years go on, I think to just expect it to take care of itself is a big ask, particularly after we, kind of abuse ourselves through the years. And I agree with you. You reach a point where I think it's really important to actively work on keeping your body healthy and in decent shape, and be as you are, maybe schedule it out so that you don't come up with 100 excuses. I have a son who's a physical therapist, and he's working on a book right now, talking about people and just trying to get them on those first steps in that journey. You are well down the line. You are doing an exceptional job, but there are so many people who have just fallen into a pattern of being completely sedentary, not necessarily eating the best foods, and then it becomes a surprise when they get ill for one reason or another. But I think it's hard that it takes upfront energy, because I think everybody has a certain level of inertia. And I'm sure that once you're really into it, once you really got it going, then if you stop, you actually miss it. You're like, geez,
Exactly.
I want to get back to it.
Exactly. It's extremely, sorry about that, extremely rewarding. In terms of the diet, and and then going to the gym, is very, very rewarding. And then feeling well is the other thing that is very, very important. And I know so many people that are in the 40s or 50s, and they say, I'm done. I can't do this, I don't want to do that, I'm too old for this, and all the excuses. And said, no, I want to live till I'm 120. And, so, and then and then the other parts about it, Gary, as far as I'm concerned, it's, it is an attitude. So what I believe is very, very important is, that I have a number of companies that I'm active in, and Scott is getting me some water. Thank you. Just have a sip. But it's a matter of attitude, because I can be very, very busy, but it is very important that I have a positive attitude with all the things that I do. Now, the other thing that I have that you may find interesting, I was not very, very good academically. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. And that was in Northern Holland, where I was born in 1940. And then, just skipping through a period, we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me, the Canadians who fed me bread with cheese and butter, and we had the winter of 1944, 1945 was very, very difficult winter. They called it the hunger winter. And a lot of young people and elderly people died because of those circumstances. So I always knew from the time that I was 5 that I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I was going to emigrate when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me then. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 30 months, and then worked in the forest industry in Holland, where my dad was also managing a small company. And so I had 2 dreams. The one dream was to going to Canada, and then the other dream was building my own lumber company. And the third one was that prove most of the kids that I went to school with, kids are not always very forgiving, is that, after I failed grade 7 3 times, they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were very good. And they said, some people said, well, send him to the school of the mentally challenged people, or should we get him a trade of some sort? Well, they chose the trade. And so I became a furniture maker. But it was kind of looked down on. I'm proud of it now, being a laborer and a tradesman, but then it was kind of looked down on. So I always kind of felt I had to prove to myself that I could do that as well as all the other guys that went to college and university. So when I came to Canada and started with nothing, really left Holland with $150, and when I arrived here in Prince George, that's where all the timber is, and I wanted to build a lumber mill, is that I came off the bus here and I had $25.47, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, and didn't have a job, about 3 blocks away from here. But what I did have is attitude. I always avoid the negatives. No matter how tough the day is today, I'll swear it's a better day tomorrow. Passion, I'll give it everything that I got, and work ethic, and my employees gave that to me actually, and so that has always been my foundation. Now, the point that I was going to make is that after being here for 32 years, building already companies, different companies, I always felt that I still was not satisfied with that I could do it. I still felt that feeling of that I had failed, so a couple of things happened, and I see that in your bio in a way, because you are a presenter and a very successful one in demand. One of the things that I was not very good at is communicating with other people, not just because that was not my born language, but if I had more than 3 people, then that didn't work for me until somebody dragged me, ex-sister-in-law actually, said to me, I want to take you to Toastmasters in 1990. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Toastmasters.
Yeah.
So, and I said, what are they going to do? You're going to, you said, no, you just sit there and you watch what they are doing. And I said, okay, well, nobody's going to ask me anything. No. I said, no, I was sitting halfway through the meeting and say, hey, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. So I stayed there for 10 years. And became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level in Toastmasters. And probably less than 1%, 0.5% of go to that level, not because of by choice. And and it served me well. Obviously, I'm now also an in-demand professional speaker, in addition to all the other things but it gave me confidence. Then the other thing that happened that was critical for me in terms of changing me is that it was in January 1997 that I walked into a store here, a bookstore, still here, and I opened a book. Still don't know why I did it, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. And as I opened the book, I looked at it and I said, ADHD. I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I bought the book, and got to know it well, started checking on ADHD. I'd never even heard of it. And the more I saw about it, the more clearer it became to me that looking back, it kind of explained a lot of things to me. And then it took me, even then, I was already 57 years old. It took me 5 years before I even talked to my doc, who was a personal friend of ours, delivered our two daughters. And one day I walked into his office. He said, "John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we looked at it together and then concluded, yeah, for sure. And so the more I got to know about it, the more I felt, quite a number of years later, actually, now I was 62, it became clearer and clearer in terms of what I was doing. I was quite very successful, actually. And then at the same time, I discovered that, in my opinion, it's a superpower. It allows me to do a whole lot of things virtually all at the same time. And if I do it now, then already then, I had people talking to me about many times and say, you should write a book about all the things that you did and starting with nothing and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So for 20 years, I thought about writing. I started, stopped, and as you well know, writing books is not easy. And so I wrote, and then so I knew that if I didn't do it now, about 4 or 5 years ago, then it would never happen. So the book that I wrote is 80 years of my life, thinking about it for 20 years, and then it took me 2 years to write it, against all odds. And it's not about how successful John is. No, it's just the opposite. It is going through all the ups and downs, and the dreams, to follow the dreams and all the challenges along the way. And hopefully it can help some people that thinks that you can't do it or it is not possible. Everything is possible in my mind. Now, the other part that I did is that ADHD had such an impact on me in terms of the stigma around it in particular, that I felt I had to be much more vocal about that. And so, so I felt I had to write a book about that. And I did write a book about that, ADHD Unlocked. And the general thought was that about 8% of the population are probably affected by ADHD. I believe it's much more than that, likely as high as 20%. And so it's not only for people that have ADHD, but also people that are slow learners or are affected by trauma in some form or fashion that subsequently become slow learners or not used to sitting in a setting of 4 or 5 years trying to be taught a certain core knowledge and all the other stuff around it, and just are not well suited for doing that. And so I wrote the book about that, and it has become very popular. And then the other thing that always I found interesting is, and that comes so true in you, if I listened to you and saw your bio, is that I had a passion in all the things that I do, even now still doing the books, doing podcasting, doing writing, doing public speaking. And I know so many people, they hate their jobs. Or I talk to young people and I say, what are you going to do for a career? And say, well, I don't know. I said, well, get exposure to certain fields that you say, I like this or that or whatever, right? And so I felt I can help them maybe by writing a book about it. So I wrote, the book came out last July actually, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And then saying the right question would be, hey John, are you living the dream? I am, every day, even at 83, and I still have lots of dreams ahead, what I want to do and how I want to do it. I'm going to sign each one of these books and send you a copy of it actually tomorrow. And, so that's kind of, gives you just a little bit of background there. And then the next one that I'm doing is that Living Young, Dying Old.
Yeah, I mean, It's all great. You've given me much to chew on. A couple of really important uh, pieces there, I think. First of all, I'm kind of simpatico with you on a number of things. I didn't have to go through any of it, but my mother was British, and she went through World War II. Was bombed and uh, went through a number of harrowing experiences and lost a fiance and all that sort of thing. So World War II, I'm very steeped in World War II history, and appreciate what you and your family went through. Another thing, though, that you hit on that I think is really important for people to understand. We use certain measures, it feels like, in society to judge the intelligence, the capabilities of each other, and they're very fixed. They're very institutionalized. And for example, I'm on an admissions board for a medical school, and we very much get pulled into obviously grades and these standardized tests. And it's interesting though when we get talking, the reality is that those are not necessarily the best measures for who's going to make a great doc in the future. And I think, particularly when I ran a training program for neurosurgery, we realized that just because somebody could cite every journal article that was ever written, or, the Latin names of every disease and all that sort of thing, didn't necessarily make them great surgeons. And what we really looked for was what I called street smarts. I wanted somebody who, when presented with something that is out of the blue, something that's not expected, that they could figure their way out of it, because that's what a lot of brain surgery was like. It doesn't always go the way you think it will or plan for it, and you better be ready to tackle it when it's not presented to you right out of a book.
Exactly.
And so, and some people will call that adaptive intelligence, but one way or the other, we wanted the street smarts. We wanted the people who could take care of themselves under any condition. And part of that goes to another thing that you talked about, is passion. If there's no passion there, if it's boring to you, or you're just doing it for money, or you're just doing it for ulterior motives, but it's not gripping you and filling you with passion, you're just not going to be as good at it. And it doesn't really matter how smart you think you are, or how smart society tells you are. I think without the passion, you're just not gonna make it. And then finally, I would say to you, I would probably put myself somewhere in that ADHD categorization. I always remember my father telling me, he was in the Navy in World War II, and he always used to say, with a swear, doggone it, kid, you could take apart a battleship, meaning I was never focused. I was all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm still, like, for example, I'm a horrible reader. I'm so slow at reading, and my memory's not great. So without a great memory, I had to kind of try to figure things out. Why does things work this way? And by doing that, it would register. But if I just had to memorize the names of all these diseases or organs or organic chemicals or that sort of thing, none of it stuck. So a lot of shared experience there, John.
So what I find, Gary, and thank you for sharing that with us, obviously, but what I found is that the unfortunate part is that and again, as you know from your mother and your background, is that I was born in 1940, and I still remember from 3.5, 4 years old, hundreds of bombers overhead that were bombing Germany. We were sitting, as you're familiar with Holland, the extreme northeastern part, about 20 minutes from the border. And then, so my dad was drafted. My mom I was born November the 1st. I had a sister 1 year older, a brother 2 years older than me. And my dad was drafted into the Dutch Army in April of 1940, and the last they heard from him, he was caught in Rotterdam when it was bombed and thousands of people died. And we never really knew if he died or he was alive until after the war. And so, and we still then, when we were 4 or 5 during the hunger winter, and lots of people around us, but they all had the same issues, trying to survive. And so we would go every morning with gunny sacks into the railroad yards, picking up anything edible or burnable. And the reason that we did as little kids is because they would boot us one, but they wouldn't shoot us. And then we were back the following morning. And and then obviously during the liberation, we saw far too much that we should not have seen. And, dead bodies and all the other things that happened, especially to the last part when they were trying to push the Germans out back into Germany. Things were pretty rough there in the area that we were. And I was affected by PTSD, no question about it, still today, in a way from that point, in the inner child. And I got counseling for that when I was well into my 50s, actually. And so very emotional. But the other part that I do, Gary, is that every year, including in the last couple of weeks, Remembrance Day, November the 11th, I always try to talk to at least 4 schools, and I've done that in the last 12 years, where I can at least give my impression of having been there, divide the 2 minutes, what does it really mean to us, how fortunate we are, and to share with the students, that how lucky we are, how to be blessed every day that we have with our families, and that overnight things can change. And we can see that today, obviously, in the Ukraine, the Middle East, and all the things. We are so fortunate in North America, but I feel I have an obligation to talk about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree on so many levels. We are lucky beyond comprehension, and maybe almost too lucky in that I think we start to take it for granted.
Exactly.
I didn't have to go through what you went through, but I think the stories of my mother, in particularly, gave me at least some appreciation for how fragile it all is. And then, I would say this to you too, John, that my other experience in life, being a neurosurgeon, is that was presented to me right in my face on a daily basis, many times a day, how quickly a life can change from having everything, being happy and content, and your loved ones, and just be utterly ruined by a car accident, by a stroke, by by a tumor or hemorrhage, or falling down a stairs. Anything. It's all so fragile, and the more
Absolutely.
we appreciate it, the more we take care of ourselves, the more I really hope the more we take care of each other, the better off we all are.
So the other part that was important to me is that growing up in Holland is giving back, and culture, is in the community and becoming part of the community. And so I do quite a bit of that, and now obviously being, I believe I'm a very good speaker now compared to where I was, obviously. I should just add one more thing to Toastmasters. I've seen hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people going through Toastmasters, the initial meetings of it, and they fear public speaking more, as they say, than death in a lot of cases, which is true. The worst example of somebody that feared it, I've never seen anybody as fearful as me. I could have crawled out of there, and then obviously changed everything around. So the other one is, in terms of being a good speaker, is that it gives me the opportunity to share with others, not about hurrah, how successful John is, but more about the things that, having had the broad experience, how to share that with everybody. And so just today, I did, actually just today, I did a presentation to a group of business people here in Prince George, 50 or 60 people. Gave them all a copy of my book, actually, and that's signed. And then the day before, I did a presentation to 62 young people that were in grade 4 to 6 or 7, and on a school about 62 kids, and then sharing with them, and then asked them to give me questions, and that allowed me also to talk about ADHD, because I think we have to talk about that more. And at least 3 or 4 of them afterwards came up to me and said, "I have ADHD too." I said, "Good for you. It's a superpower." Now, the other thing that I quickly wanted to mention to you, and I found it so interesting that you said that, and then I want you to explain us to your book writing and the other things, because otherwise I've been talking too much. But I wanted to say the one, when I was writing ADHD Unlocked, that when I wrote it as an ADHD person, so you can pick it up anywhere, go backwards, forwards, and read bit by bit, and no matter where you start, it is not the normal book, because I have the same issue as you. I have difficulty writing these books that go on and on. Something was missing, and I looked at it and saying, yeah, the book is good. And if I was reading the book, then I would say, the book is very good, John, and you introduce people that are knowledgeable about it and all the other kind of things. But it's missing is, where do we go from here? And so by pure coincidence, I was sitting on a flight actually from Victoria to Vancouver. I call it my overseas flight. It takes 12 minutes. And it takes Gage a day 30 minutes. And I was sitting next to this person, and he said, "You remember me?" And I said, "No." He said, "My name is Tom Romer, and I'm the executive vice president of British Columbia Institute of Technology." And I said, "Yeah, now I remember." He said, "You were writing a book." And I said, "Yeah, Against All Odds." And he said, "Yeah, how did you make out, blah, blah, blah." And then the other thing, I said, "I'm writing another book, and it's ADHD Unlocked." And he said, "I like that. We should talk about it." And then the plane stopped, and we had to go. And the following week, by pure coincidence, he was again, Dr. Romer again was on the plane. He was sitting in 4F, and I was sitting in 8. And I saw him, and I said, "Tom, over all these people," and they all kind of looked like, I said, "Stop by the gate. I need to talk to you." And he said, "Okay, I'll do that." Anyway, he stopped by the gate, and I said, "I'm writing the book. I need to talk about," he said, "the concept that we are looking at now, particularly slow learners, ADHD, is micro-certification. And it will click with you, I'm sure. The spectrum of the 4 years in school, and by the time you distill it, is 6 months, 4 months, 3 months of learning the actual skill sets. I'm not talking about brain surgery, obviously that's very delicate, but more about that core knowledge, and then adding the other things later." And I thought, click. So he wrote a bit of it into my book about that, but that to me said, where do we go from here? And it is precisely what you were talking about, Gary, is saying, the normal learning and teaching is really not focused on remembering all these things, but more about street smarts and having skill sets that other than the ones that we use now to select people into certain areas. So I thought that was important.
Yeah, no, very much. And yeah, I mean, what matters most ultimately is translating whatever we're learning to practicality, right? You want to be able to do something with it no matter what you're in. And I guess it's great to be theoretical and, to be pushing the envelope, and we need people doing that for sure. But we also need people who, keep the society running. And I think that takes a whole different set of skill sets.
Yeah. So the other thing, though, that we should talk about is that I think you became a very active writer, and did you already? You always must have had already something and if I look at it for myself and you being, a touch ADHD in a way that writing is not easy, but at the same time it was always on my mind. Was this something that you wanted to do? And then obviously now I believe in your bio, you've done about 4 or 5 books and you're working on 3 or 4 other ones.
Yeah, I mean, again, talk about some sort of ADHD, uh, I don't know, tendency. I first of all, I enjoy writing, but when I write, it just comes spilling out. I mean, and it's very disorganized. The thoughts just hit the page, but it comes out in high volume. I tend to call it verbal dysentery. It just spills out all over the page, and then I have to spend a fair amount of time trying to rein it all in, and get it organized enough that hopefully that it's digestible for people. And I usually end up having to throw out at least half of what I've written. But I've always enjoyed it. In medicine, you end up writing a lot, no matter whether you like it or not, because you're always documenting things, and
Nobody can write that, Gary.
Yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
can read it. I'm just being funny because every time I get a message
No,
from my dog, I can't read it. No, I'm just being funny, So
no, I get it, but that's why the computers saved us, right?
yeah,
And now I guess a lot of people are starting to use AI to do their notes. But you write all the time, and so when I decided to write some books about, most of it was about burnout. Um, it just felt easy. It didn't feel like it was a chore. The chore came in refining it and making it again
yeah.
readable, but just getting it out on the page didn't feel like that much of a challenge.
Now, the interesting part about in my particular case is that, I grew up speaking dialect actually in Holland. The northeastern part of Holland is a dialect, so I had to acquire to speak Dutch to me. High Dutch was something that was acquired and everybody could hear right away, oh, he's a farmer from up there, you know. And so after I barely got the one part under control, then I left for Canada. And again, I couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. So I had to acquire to speak English. Yeah, but the amazing part about all of this is even starting to do grade 7 3 times, I'm a very good writer. But do the same as you do. It just happens to me automatically. And I believe, and I can say that to you and you will take it in the right context, is that I'm a very good speaker. And I'm more than anything, I'm a storyteller, a natural storyteller. That's who I am. And I can go to a presentation. I always prepare. If it is a podcast, that is an interview, I always try to, but not over prepare. Or if I over prepare, then it doesn't become natural. I like to have it natural. If I do a presentation, even yesterday, when I did a presentation for an hour, I have a very good memory, and I remember pretty much what I'm going to talk about, and it flows for me. Now, part of that is Toastmasters, part of that is my ability to write, and then the other one, obviously, I was very, very good at Toastmasters, and a natural talent came to the top. But for all those years, after failing grade 7 till I was 57, when I discovered ADHD and got then diagnosed at 62, I kind of felt that I had been a failure in a way, although it didn't slow me down from being successful as an entrepreneur in building companies, but I feel now even that I have an obligation to write about it, to talk about it, and not to make a lot of money out of it, because that's not where I make my. So in a lot of books I give away because it just is important for me to share. I believe I have an obligation to do that.
Yeah, I think I think we all can help the generations behind us because we all have a lot of road under our wheels, and I think somebody like you who has really had to put it all together under various different stressors and situations, particularly has a lot to offer. The biggest question is how do you get people to actually tune in and listen? And as you say, I think probably one of the most efficacious ways to do it is through storytelling. I think if we get up there and we just click our way through a PowerPoint, we lose people very quickly. But if you
Yeah,
can kind of engage in a story, and I think the more personal the stories, generally the better. So yeah, I 100% agree. And you start with your story, and you're going to have people locked in, and then once
exactly,
you have them in, then you can make your points.
exactly.
Um, my memory is not nearly as good as yours because I can get in the middle of one of those talks and forget what I wanted to say, or three other things get in there and rattle around. So I usually need something. If hopefully not a PowerPoint, I can't stand PowerPoints, but I often write myself, even here today, I write myself notes on just, I'm very old school and write
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
notes on
yeah,
a cue card, and
yeah.
every so often may have to pull out a cue card and remind myself of the critical points at least that I want to make.
Yeah, no question about that, Gary. The advantage that I have is that another thing I was going to say about ADHD, and I have a forward, and I will send you this book, and the forward that you will see written is by a good friend of mine, and that is Dr. Tracy Lotz, who is a medical doctor and a surgeon as well, ADHD. And and so and then the other point that I was going to make in terms of and she will say that like ADHD, even with her training, it was a bunch of squirrels all running through that, and all kinds of things come to mind, and I can relate to that. The advantage that I had, I used to have that ramble, but I don't do that now because of 10 years of Toastmasters. And that
Hmm.
served me well because Toastmasters is not only about becoming a good speaker, is become a good listener, and then think and then so that your conversation is synchronized in the sense that it flows not all over the place, and so that sort of thing. Yeah, and so that benefited me well there. But yeah, anything else that comes to mind, Gary? We had a very, very interesting conversation, obviously.
Oh, I'm sure we can go on for hours. I
Yeah,
do appreciate your point about the Toastmasters in that I think I think it's the same for almost every human endeavor, but I think we often see somebody who is really good at what they're doing, and you just kind of assume, oh, it's natural. How lucky they are. They were just given this gift that they're able to do this. Be it giving talks, be it running companies, be it doing surgery. I just watched the documentary on David Beckham. So be
yeah,
it playing soccer. These things don't just happen. It's
no,
because people
hard work.
go. They work real hard. They open themselves up, I think, also to mentorship, where they're willing to listen to somebody who's already been through it all and can cut off, a lot of the hardships that you would face if you're just trying to do it all on your own. And in a self-critical way, that was one of my biggest stumbling blocks in life. I just was fiercely independent, always kind of thought I'm going to do this myself. It's all me, me, me. I can do it. I have, all the tools necessary. And by doing that, just made the road 10 times harder than
Yeah.
if I had bothered to listen to some experts and really, take to heart what they were trying to tell me. So yeah, no, I think your points are very well taken. The other thing I want to cycle back to, I had forgotten to mention. See, I write these notes down, and they're important to me. You had mentioned early on about your hearing aids, and obviously how you take care of yourself, and all these enterprises that you're in right now. The podcasts, the books, and all that sort of thing. And I think you are diagramming some of the best ways to stave off an old age brain, if you will, if to stave off dementia, even in that we know there's good evidence, for example, that hearing loss is very much related to dementia. Not necessarily that it causes it, but there's a fairly strong correlation. And part of that may be because we start to disengage socially. We stop seeking intellectual stimulation, and so they all contribute. So here you are, you're taking care of the hearing, getting intellectual stimulation all the time. You are integrating and socializing all the time. And you're taking good care of your physical health. I mean, it's a textbook for how to take care of your brain.
And the textbook is called Living Young, Dying Old. And I
See?
may I may stay in touch with you on it a bit, and possibly even send you the documents before I send it to the printers, to give you a general idea of what I'm thinking about, and maybe asking for some feedback from you, because I like your approach to life, and obviously I really really enjoyed the podcast, Gary, and it was a pleasure to interact with you on this podcast, and at the same time, let's make sure we stay in touch.
Oh, absolutely. It's a thrill and an honor. I have so very much appreciate it.
And mutual, Gary. It was an honor and a privilege. Take care.